Hello, curious minds, and welcome to this intellectual journey. Today we are going to dive into the mind of a woman who didn't just write novels. She rewrote the way we perceive reality itself. We are talking about an architect of language who captured the invisible. Her name was Adeline Virginia Woolf, and if you've ever felt that time isn't a straight line, or that your thoughts flow like an overflowing river, then you've already lived inside the world she helped discover for Western literature. Before her, the novel was an orderly house. Brick upon brick, chronological facts. But Virginia looked at that house and saw a prison. She wanted to break down the walls to let us see how light and shadow truly play within our consciousness. In this video essay, we are going to deconstruct her three great legacies. Modernism as a breaking point, the stream of consciousness as a technique, and her immortal manifesto on women and fiction titled A Room of One's Own. Get ready to challenge the conventional. The question that will guide us is simple yet devastating. What does it actually take to be free? Not just politically free, but mentally free to create, to think, to truly own that torrent of ideas that floods us every second. Before we begin, a brief note. To bring this narration to life, I have used artificial intelligence tools to generate the images you see. Think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and the atmosphere of the story we are telling. I truly hope you enjoy it. To understand Woolf, we must first understand her cage. She was born in 1882, in the height of the Victorian era, a world of rigid rules, of physical and mental corsets, where life was measured by outward appearances and not by inner truth. Her father was Leslie Stephen, an intellectual giant but a severe man. Their house at Hyde Park Gate was full of books, but also of heavy silences. Virginia grew up devouring her father's library, educating herself while her brothers went off to university. This distinction is crucial. Men were given the public world, formal education, power. Women like Virginia were given the domestic sphere, the home, tea. And yet, in that seclusion, she was sharpening a mind that would cut history in two. After their father's death, the Stephen siblings did something radical. They moved to the neighborhood of Bloomsbury. Here, the famous Bloomsbury Group was born, a group of intellectuals, artists, and writers who rejected Victorian morality and sought a new way of living. In Bloomsbury, they talked about everything: art, sexuality, psychoanalysis. It was a laboratory of ideas. For the first time, Virginia felt free from the chains of the past. Here, she began to wonder how literature could capture this new complexity of modern life. We must remember the context. The world was changing fast. Electricity, the automobile, and soon, the First World War. The old way of writing realist novels, where everything was solid and predictable, no longer served to explain a fragmented world. Virginia observed the writers of her time. She called them materialists. She said they were concerned with describing the body, the house, the clothes, the social status. But the soul escaped them. Life itself, vibrating beneath the surface, escaped them. She wrote a famous phrase that defines her quest. She said that life is not a series of gig lamps symmetrically arranged. Life is a luminous halo, a semi-transparent envelope surrounding us from the beginning of consciousness to the end. What does this mean? It means that our experience of reality is not linear. While you're listening to me, you might be thinking about dinner, remembering a childhood scent, and feeling the cold in your hands, all at once. That is the luminous halo. That is what she wanted to write. Here we enter her great technical innovation, the stream of consciousness. Many believe this means writing whatever comes to mind. But it's not like that. It is a rigorous technique to simulate the ordered chaos of the human mind. Imagine reading someone's thoughts exactly as they happen. No filter. Jumping from the present to the past in a millisecond. Woolf perfected this in masterpieces like Mrs. Dalloway, published in 1925. In Mrs. Dalloway, The entire novel takes place in a single day. Clarissa Dalloway prepares for a party, but inside her head we travel back through decades. We visit her fears, her lost loves. Chronological time is short, but psychological time is infinite. This was revolutionary. It broke the tyranny of the clock. It taught us that a moment of epiphany while buying flowers can be more important than 10 years of political history. Woolf democratized the importance of internal experience. She argued that the novelist's task is to record the atoms as they fall upon the mind, no matter how disconnected they may seem. Nothing is trivial if it's part of the human experience. The everyday becomes sacred. But Virginia didn't just explore the individual mind. She also explored the collective mind and the connection between people. In her work To the Lighthouse, published in 1927, she takes this to the limit. It is a novel about the Ramsay family and a postponed visit to a lighthouse. The central part of this book is fascinating. It's called Time Passes. In it, the human characters disappear. The house stands empty. And Woolf describes how the wind, the dust, and time corrode objects over 10 years. It is nature reclaiming its space. It's a lesson in humility. It shows us that the world continues to exist without us, that our personal dramas are small compared to the immensity of time. And yet, at the end of the book, art manages to rescue a moment from that destruction. Now let's switch gears. Let's talk about her social impact. Because Woolf didn't just look inward. She looked at the power structures surrounding her. And this leads us to her most influential essay, A Room of One's Own, published in 1929. This text grew out of lectures on women and fiction. Virginia asked a simple question. Why is there no female Shakespeare? Why is the history of literature dominated almost exclusively by men until the 19th century? The answer isn't biological. It's not that women have less talent. The answer is material, economic. To write fiction, to create art, a person needs two things: money and a room of one's own. This seems obvious today, but it was radical then. Woolf demystified genius. Genius doesn't float in the air. Genius needs to be fed. It needs free time. It needs solitude. And historically, women never had those things. Women belonged to their fathers or their husbands. They had no money of their own. And they were always in the common sitting room, interrupted by children, by the kitchen, by visitors. How can you write a masterpiece if you're interrupted every 10 minutes? To illustrate this, Woolf invents a fictional character, Judith Shakespeare, the imaginary sister of William Shakespeare. Let's suppose she had the same fire in her mind, the same poetry, the same innate talent as her brother. While William goes to school, learns Latin, and travels to London to act, Judith stays home darning socks. If she tries to write, she is mocked. If she tries to travel alone, she is abused. Her talent becomes a torture because it has no outlet. Judith's end is tragic. She takes her own life and is buried at a crossroads. Woolf tells us that the genius of women has been lost not for lack of ability, but for lack of opportunity, for the lack of those 500 pounds a year and that room of one's own. 500 pounds was a metaphor for financial independence. Woolf knew that intellectual freedom depends on material things. One cannot think well, love well, sleep well if one has not dined well, is one of her famous quotes. But Woolf didn't stop at complaining. She gave us a solution. She said that women must write. They must earn money. And they must write not like men, but like women, exploring their own sentences, their own psychology, their own vision of the world. This connects with another fascinating concept of Woolf's, the androgyny of the mind. In her book Orlando, she tells the story of a person of noble birth who lives for 300 years and, halfway through the novel, transitions between identities, yet remains the same person. With Orlando, she poked fun at traditional biographies and gender roles. She suggested that a great mind is androgynous. that it must have the capacity to see the world with both eyes, the masculine and the feminine, to be truly creative. This idea resonates powerfully today. Woolf anticipated debates about gender fluidity and identity nearly a century before they became mainstream. Her mind was so free that rigid categories simply didn't work for her. However, we cannot talk about Virginia Woolf without talking about her darkness. Her brilliant mind was also a tormented one. She suffered from what we would likely diagnose today as bipolar disorder. She had devastating depressive crises. She heard voices. She had terrible headaches. And she lived with the constant fear of madness. But the amazing thing is that she used that fragility, she used that extreme sensitivity to capture subtleties that others ignored. Her pain was part of her lens. Her husband, Leonard Woolf, was her anchor. He cared for her with immense devotion. Together they founded the Hogarth Press, a publishing house that printed her own books and those of other geniuses like T.S. Eliot. They had total control over their production. Having her own press meant that Virginia didn't have to please any editor. She could experiment. She could be as strange and new as she wanted. It was the ultimate expression of having a room of one's own. She had a printing press of her own. But we come to the year 1941. The Second World War had broken out. Bombs were falling on London. They destroyed her house in the city. Virginia felt the madness returning, that this time she wouldn't recover. On March 28th, 1941, Virginia wrote a letter to Leonard. It is perhaps one of the most moving farewell letters in history. She told him, "I owe all the happiness of my life to you, but I cannot go on spoiling your life any longer." She walked to the River Ouse near her house. She filled her coat pockets with heavy stones and stepped into the water. The current took one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century, but it did not take her words. Woolf's death didn't erase her legacy. On the contrary, her books are read today more than ever, because she captured something universal. The loneliness of the human being and, at the same time, the incredible richness of our inner lives. She taught us how to look not just at the surface of things, but at their essence. She taught us that a woman thinking in silence in a room is as important to history as a general on a battlefield. She taught us that time is elastic, that memory is a capricious painter, and that to create something true, we must have the courage to be ourselves, to break the Victorian molds we carry inside. Today, when we read Virginia Woolf, we aren't reading a historical document. We are reading a mirror. We see ourselves in her doubts, in her epiphanies, and in her relentless quest to capture the present moment before it fades away. So the next time you feel your thoughts wandering or the past mixing with the present, don't be afraid. Remember Virginia. You are experiencing the flow of life, the luminous halo, and you have every right to explore it. I invite you to read her. Don't be afraid of her complexity. Start with A Room of One's Own. Then try Mrs. Dalloway. Let her prose wash over you like the waves she wrote so much about. It is well worth the effort. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the life and work of Adeline Virginia Woolf. It has been an honor to unravel these threads with you. Her legacy is a torch that continues to illuminate the dark corners of our consciousness. If this analysis sparked a flame in your mind, and if you value this kind of deep and rigorous content, please subscribe and share this video. Help us build our own room of one's own in this vast digital world. Until next time.